All right, Genesis chapter 30. Let's read a little bit more about Jacob here. Genesis chapter 30, let's start in verse 25. We're skipping over some text there that we didn't cover last week, but it's just about the children being born. And then after Joseph was born, it says this, "And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed thee, blessed me for thy sake." So this is at the end of the 14 years that he's worked for Rachel and Leah. And you know, last week we talked about he got both of them within 8 days of each. He got Leah, and then 8 days later he got Rachel. And then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. He was obligated to do that. And he kept his word and did what he agreed to, even though Laban swindled him and didn't keep what his word. So Jacob has nothing but his wives and children. We need to realize that. Jacob's working that was his wages. He worked for those two women. That was his wages. "Tell me what thy wages shall be." And he said, "Well, that's what I'll do. I'll work if you'll let me marry her." And so he did. And you see what happened. He doesn't have anything. You know, he has his wives and children. He's poor. Laban's rich by now. Under Jacob's supervision, Laban's estate has increased greatly. But not for Jacob. He's just the guy doing all the work, managing everything, making sure it's done right. Laban has taken advantage of Jacob for 14 years. How would you like to have a job you work for 14 years and you get nothing? But 4 women and a whole passel of kids, 11 to be exact. Well, maybe 12 if Dinah was born in there, and I guess she was somewhere. So Jacob's kept his word and fulfilled his obligation to Laban. That's what we ought to always do. I mean, that's integrity. That's the right thing to do. You do right, no matter what other people do to you. You don't swindle them because they swindled you. Jacob's an old man with a large family and nothing with which to provide for them. He's at least 91 at this point. At the end of the 14 years, he's 91 years old. And he's got 12 children and 4 women to take care of. And he has nothing. Now that's a sweet arrangement for Laban. He gets to keep all his children and grandchildren around him. He has someone to take care of all of his business and work for him for free. He's increased greatly because of Jacob's good management of his flocks and herds. He doesn't want it to end, and he doesn't want Jacob to take his daughters and grandchildren and leave. So he'll get to see. He won't. If he does, he won't get to see him, and he'll have to take over the work that Jacob's been doing all these years. Who's going to do that? Well, Laban's going to have to take over. That's hard to do when you're used to not having to fool with it, and somebody else does it all for you. There's always people like Laban in the world. You're always going to run into them. They're going to be in your family. They're going to be in the churches you go to. They use others to their own advantage and will continue to do so as long as they possibly can. I'd say probably every one of us in here has been used by somebody like that. Maybe not for 14 years, but we've all put in our time for somebody else. And they know how to sweet talk and use flattering words in order to keep the deal going their way. You know, they wouldn't give you a raise or give you any more time off for nothing. You couldn't talk them into it for nothing until you tell them you're leaving. And then all of a sudden they can manage to come up with a way to pay you more, to make it easier for you. Verse 27, and Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. Well, you got to throw a little religion in there, a little bit of God, a little reference to God, and that makes it sound even more honest and noble and right. When those they're taken advantage of in such a way finally get enough and say they're leaving, then they're then threatened and accused and spoken evil of a lot of times too. Yeah, once you get enough of it and you have to get away from it, well, then you're the villain. You're the bad guy. You're the one that they accuse of all kinds of things. But God in heaven is watching. Just always remember that. Yes. I've always tried to remember that. The Lord is watching. And the Lord is keeping records, and He knows who does right and who doesn't. And we're all going to stand before Him in judgment. And we're all going to face Him. And that's why in the Bible you'll read different times they said, the Lord judge between me and thee. Because, I'm doing right. And you're not. But God in heaven is watching. He looks out for the righteous. He does. Psalm 34, verse 15. The Bible says, the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and His ears are open unto their cry. That's true. God hears you when you're a righteous person. What does that mean? That you're really wicked in all your ways, but you've got some kind of record in heaven that's you're righteous. No, it's, Don't ever misunderstand imputed righteousness as something that's just on the books while you're really wicked. Your practice, your lifestyle, your mind, your heart, you're just wicked. And you live that way. But somehow God counts you as righteous. There is no such thing as that. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Being saved means you're turned from sin unto righteousness. You live right. The righteousness of God is what you live for and by. It's what God says is right. He's your king. He's your ruler. You've submitted to Him. You're going to walk in His ways. You're going to live right. That's what it means to be righteous. Counted among the righteous. You're not counted among the righteous when you're living in wickedness. That's absurd to think or believe such a thing as that. And it's wickedness to teach it to other people. The wise person will face the facts of reality about people like Laban and not keep trying to make excuses for them or trying to put a better light on their actions. We're living in a time when it's more and more and more that way. People sympathize with the villain. I'm seeing more stuff that people are writing about why people do that. The guy that shot the United Healthcare CEO, just a flat, cold-blooded murderer. Shot him from behind. In all of history, that's the most cowardly, dirty thing, most dishonorable thing you could do. Shoot somebody in the back. But that's what he did, and he is actually, there's a lot of people in this country who thinks he's a good guy. He's a hero. Killed a bad guy. A guy that was just had a job and a family. There's another one. There's more, The guy that drowned his wife, his pregnant wife. This has been 20-some years ago, but out there in California, and they said he gets so much fan mail that they don't know how to manage it all. While he's in prison. From stupid, crazy, silly women writing to him, wanting to marry him and adore him. And not only that, but everybody's got this attitude now of taking the side of evil. No, a murderer. They desired a murderer instead of Jesus. We're just about to the same state again, aren't we? The righteous die and the murderer is the hero. That's where we're getting to. Jacob's hands been tied for 14 years because he was bound by the contract that he made with Laban for Rachel. You can say what you want to about Jacob. People can call him a trickster and a crook and I don't know what all, and all these titles they've given to Jacob, but he did what he said. He kept his word no matter how bitter it was, no matter how much it cost him, no matter how much of his life he had to spend doing it. He did what he promised to do. Now he's free from obligation and he's not bound to stay any longer. He wants to just take his family and go. And he's willing to do it and just figure out how we're going to make it when we get out of here. I want out of this place. But he has no means to even move his family back to Canaan, and Laban knows this. And Laban asked Jacob to stay and work for him and to set his own wages. Also, by the way, just think about it. Jacob still remembers Esau, his brother, and the last words and news he had from him, that the next time he's seen him, he's going to kill him. So he's going back to that. Think of what a predicament he's in. So Laban's wanting Jacob to stay. Don't go. I mean, if you think anything at all of me, if I've found favor in thine eyes, stay with me. God has really blessed me because of you. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay here. I believe you being here, God will bless me more. Genesis 30 and 28, and he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. Well, now he said this before, didn't he? Same exact words. Let's make a deal, Jacob. You just name your wages and I'll pay it. I wonder if Jacob snickered when he said that. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. All right. No, I got it wrong, didn't I? I'm as bad as George Bush. All right. Anyway, he has learned by experience that Jacob's not a greedy man like himself. He's been around him long enough now that he knows him pretty well. And he can see that Jacob ain't, he's not got his hand in everybody's pocket, anybody's pocket. He's a man of integrity. He wasn't greedy. He wasn't wanting to be rich. He wasn't trying to be rich. He was just trying to get by and get his family and get out of there. 14 years, Jacob had taught Laban some things about himself. Experience is the best teacher and the most trustworthy witness. What we say with our words in a moment is not nearly as effective on others as what we live day after day and year after year. Jacob reminds Laban of how he's already worked for him for 14 years and how Laban has been enriched since he's been taking care of all of his business. In verse 29, let's read this. He said unto him, Jacob to Laban, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now when shall I provide for mine own house? And he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. Jacob, don't you see what a situation he's in? His father-in-law. It's all his father-in-law's. Ain't none of it his. He's got brothers-in-law, and it'll be theirs, not Jacob's. Jacob said, when am I going to be able to provide for myself and my own family? When am I going to be able to gather anything for myself or make any kind of a means for a living for my family? When? If I work for you. He said, if you'll just, I won't take your charity, but I'll earn it. So, Jacob, now when Jacob, I'm sorry, I've lost my bearings here. I'm very tired. Laban's answer is, what shall I give thee? Well, we shouldn't understand that as generosity on Laban's part, because the rest of the story shows how greedy he was and how unconcerned he was with Jacob's welfare. I mean, it was almost as if he assumed Jacob was complaining about the fact that he'd earned nothing but his 2 wives in the 14 years of labor. Man, I've given you my daughters. I'll give them a handmaid apiece. I mean, you've lived here with me, room and board. What in the world more do you expect? Jacob was concerned about providing for his own family. He was old. I mean, he's 91 years old. I think it's time to start worrying about taking care of your family, don't you? But between the age of 84 and 91, he had 12 children. He gained 4 wives and 12 children. Think about that for just a minute. That's a little bit overwhelming, don't you think? People now have 1, 2, 3 children, and they're just overwhelmed. Oh my goodness! I hear them in the store, especially all the time. Women say, "I don't know how you take it. I don't know how you can do it. One's all I can stand." How would you like to have 4 women fighting all the time and stabbing each other in the back, and 12 kids, and 2/3 of them in diapers? Jacob's answer was, "Thou shalt not give me anything. I won't take your charity." Jacob sets his own wages. Now here's what he does. He said, "I will," in verse 32, "I'll pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep." You know, people have to understand, understand the language. Look up the words. Cattle means all livestock. It's not talking, about cows among the sheep. It's not brown cow. Today we think of cattle as cows. But cattle, the word really means livestock. So sheep are cattle. Goats are cattle. Cows are cattle. They're all farm animals and they're all cattle. So I'll take all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before my face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. So in other words, I'll take all them out, and whenever you find one among my cattle, you can count it as I've stolen. When you come inspecting to see if I've got any of your cattle. He would take all the speckled, spotted, brown out of Laban's herds, and then from that point, any speckled, spotted, ring-straked, or brown would be his hire of the cattle that were born. They didn't divide the cattle, and Jacob got all of the brown, speckled and spotted and all of that. They didn't do that. Jacob still has nothing. They just separated the cattle, and from this point, when the ones that are born, if they're speckled and ring-straked, he gets them. If they're solid color and high grade, Laban gets them. Now that's the way it's going to work. So, by common reasoning, how likely would the cattle be to produce more spotted, speckled, and brown when all those had been removed? Laban's thinking, yeah, I'll take his deal. Laban wasn't about to refuse this deal. He'd be the winner all around. He removed all his cattle from the herds and had his sons take them 3 days' journey away. So there would be no possibility that they would breed with the cattle and produce one that would be Jacob's, in verse 36. So that shows clearly the character of Laban. He was a crook. He was a swindler. He was untrustworthy. He would take advantage of his own son-in-law and take it out of his grandchildren's mouths if he had to. He'd have Jacob continue poor and destitute of anything in order to keep him under his thumb and working to make him more rich. You see, that's what Laban really thought. He thought he'll stay here from now on, waiting on the cat. He ain't going to get nothing. Well, it's an act of faith on God and God on Jacob's part. Verse 33, so shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. Now, the color of the animals that were born was a thing that was in God's hands. Don't you know that? I mean, you can't make this happen. You know, they've got genetic engineering and you can breed cattle and you can do that, but that's not what they're doing here. You know, they're separating them. Jacob was confident. You know, that thing's in God's hand, and Jacob trusted God to show him favor and help against such a man as Laban. Now, I believe that's right. If you read the whole context of this story, I believe that's the attitude that Jacob really had. He was just trusting the Lord to help him. He had done right. He had done what he said. He'd kept his word. He'd been done wrong. And he just felt like he just needed to trust God to help him. So he was confident that he'd done right by Laban in all these years. Jacob still remembered God's promises to him at Bethel and still trusted in the fact that God would bring him back to his land again some way, somehow. And it's always the best course to trust in God and cast your burden on Him and not to form a plan of action of your own against those who use and abuse you. But that's what we always try to do. We put our hand to it. Say, I can take care of this deal myself. I know what to do. Laban went for the deal immediately. Laban said, behold, in verse 34, it might be according to thy word. Yes, sir. Good deal. Jacob, you got a deal. Verse 37, and Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree. I didn't know they had chestnut trees over there then. And peeled white strakes in them and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters in the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. Are you listening to all that? I mean, you got what's really happening here? And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses. So, Jacob, there's all kinds of assumptions that we can make about that there, but you don't really believe that standing in front of those striped sticks made them conceive ring-straked, or you don't believe that, do you? You don't believe, that's like the superstitions about a pregnant woman. If she sees a snake, the baby will die, or something like that, That isn't how it works. And we're going to read in a minute how it really happened. It's real plain in the scripture right here, if you just keep reading. Jacob made an honest deal, and then did what he could to make sure the cattle produced some spotted, speckled, and ring-straked. Well, wouldn't you? I mean, if the speckled and spotted and ring-straked are going to be yours, wouldn't you, and you're the one overseeing it, would you just try to get them to be all Laban's cattle? Well, no, you'd want to try to do what you could to get what you could for yourself, because that's the deal here. That's my hire. That's what I'm supposed to get. Anybody would do the same thing. This is not dishonesty, but good management on his part. And, if you think of it right, how's he ever going to get the better of Laban? I mean, Laban's always going to get the better of him. He's not trying to get the better of him. He's just trying to get his hire. About time that he earned something. This is another 6 years he's working for Laban here. And this is all he's going to get out of 20 years of working for Laban and making him rich. This is all he's going to get. And it could end at any time, because we read later here, Laban changed his wages 10 times. Laban kept saying, no, this ain't working like I want it to. Why wasn't it working like he wanted to? Because he wanted it all to be his. And when some of them were being Jacob's, he wanted to stop that. And he would not have paid Jacob a dime, let him have one cow, if he could have got away with it. The whole deal was as lopsided as it could be in Laban's favor. So Jacob did what little he could to give himself some kind of advantage. Apparently through this whole thing, Laban kept changing Jacob's wages whenever it wasn't going his way. Verse 37, and Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. And said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before. Now, you know how that works, don't you? Boy, I do. I've had this happen to me in my life a number of times. Somebody was real friendly, and, I was the best guy in the world and all of this, and their friend, and then the countenance changed. They didn't have to say anything. I could see it in their face. Jacob saw it in his face. I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before. But the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ringstrake shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ringstrake. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. You say, well, that's just Jacob saying that. That's his side of it, and that's what he thinks. No, God's fixing to say the same thing and back him up on it. Genesis 31 and verse 41. Jacob says this, thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. It wasn't Jacob's rods that made the cattle bare, spotted, and speckled, but God, who had seen what Laban had done to him. Verses 11 and 12. Genesis 31, 11 and 12. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. You see? That's how it worked. That's why Jacob got the cattle, and Laban diminished, and Jacob increased. So we should do right by others, no matter how they treat us. It paid off for Jacob. If he'd have just went to crooking, giving, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, if he'd have just dealt with Laban that way and said, you crook me, I'll crook you. I'll get it one way or another. If he'd have done that, you think God would have helped him? Stay faithful to God and do what's right. Maintain your integrity before God. Just do right. Keep your word. Do what you promise, no matter what it costs you. Even to your hurt. The Bible says that, about swearing to his hurt and not turning back from it. We should keep our word and be honest in our dealings, even if it is to our own hurt and loss. And we should realize that God is watching the whole thing, and that He'll take our part as long as we're true to Him and don't let our own selfishness take the reins of our life from God. Don't you know, Jacob had a hard life. He really did. I used to say bad things about Jacob and criticize him because he stood in front of Pharaoh and had a chance to give a testimony of God, and that's what he said. Well, that's all he had to say, really. I mean, he had a rough way to go. His family, his wives, the women in his life just neutralized his life, really. His children were, after, I don't know, we'll go on from here, but, the children are all little here. They were born when he's 84. When we're talking here tonight, he's 91. I mean, the oldest child's 6 years old. Think about that. 6 more years, the oldest child's 12 years old. Reuben. And they leave and go away. And then they get off over there wandering around, met Esau, and then instead of going on to Isaac, he went to Shechem, and then here they got in all that trouble. And by that time, those boys are old enough to pull the shenanigans they did. They grew up with their cousins, with their pagan cousins. And that's the downfall of a lot of people, They didn't grow up around Isaac. They didn't grow up in a godly atmosphere. They grew up in a home that was a terrible mess. They had a dad that knew God, but he didn't. There wasn't much he could do. He was working all the time for somebody else's riches, not for himself. He felt, I can imagine how he felt a lot of times. Trapped. Hopeless. The future looked awful dim. How could he ever get out of this? How could things ever work? So, Jacob, I feel for him. I think I wouldn't want to trade places with him. Let's stand.